The jungle was silent except for the sound of insects. Ethan sat near his small fire trying to cook a thin strip of dried meat. He had been alone on this strange planet for weeks, surviving on scraps and luck. His stomach growled, but he forced himself to chew slowly. Every bite mattered. Suddenly, he heard a faint sound in the darkness. It was not the cry of a bird, not the howl of a beast. It was soft, weak, almost like a child. Ethan froze, his hand reaching for the knife at his side. The fire crackled, throwing light into the shadows. The sound came again, closer this time, a whimper, trembling and full of hunger. He stood slowly, eyes scanning the tree line. Then he saw it. A pair of glowing eyes shone from the brush. They were low to the ground, unblinking, watching him. His heart pounded. He raised the knife higher. The leaves shifted and a small creature stepped into the firelight. It was a cub. Thin, fragile, bones pressing against skin marked with faint stripes. Its fur was dirty, its body shaking. The creature stumbled forward, too weak to stand tall, its eyes locked onto the meat in his hand. Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest. It was just a baby, starving, almost dying. He hesitated. Giving away food meant losing his own chance at survival. Yet the cub's desperate gaze pierced through his fear. Slowly, he crouched and placed the strip of meat on the ground. The cub's nose twitched, and in an instant it lunged forward. It tore into the food with sharp little teeth, devouring it as if it had not eaten in days. Ethan stayed still, knife in hand, watching carefully. The cub growled softly at first, protecting its prize, but after a moment it stopped and simply ate, shaking with hunger. When the last piece was gone, it licked the ground as if searching for more. The firelight danced over its small body. Ethan noticed faint claw marks on its side, maybe from another predator. His instincts told him to push it away, to scare it back into the forest. But another thought pressed into his mind. If this cub was here, where was its mother? The cub sat down, staring at him again. Its glowing eyes were not wild anymore. They seemed curious, almost thankful. For a moment, the strange silence of the jungle wrapped around them. Then, without warning, the cub turned and ran into the trees. Ethan let out a shaky breath. He thought it was over, but then the ground trembled. The fire flickered, disturbed by heavy footsteps approaching. Leaves shifted violently, branches snapped, and a low growl rolled through the night air. Ethan's blood ran cold. He stepped back, knife tight in his hand, eyes wide. From the shadows, something massive moved. Two golden eyes glared at him with burning intensity. She emerged. The mother, a towering tigress-like figure, stepped into the firelight. Her body was sleek yet powerful, fur glistening with faint silver stripes. Muscles rippled under her skin, every movement graceful but deadly. She was taller than any human, her sharp claws catching the glow of the flames. Her fangs showed as she snarled low, chest rumbling like thunder. Ethan's hand shook, but he refused to lower his blade. He knew running was useless. She was a predator, built to kill. The cub ran back and pressed against her leg, mewling softly, her head lowered, sniffing it, checking for harm. Then her gaze shifted back to Ethan. He felt the weight of that stare. Not just anger, something else. She stepped closer, circling him slowly, her tail flicking with tension. Every muscle in Ethan's body screamed to move, but he stood frozen, caught in her presence. The air grew heavy. The fire crackled louder, as if it too was afraid. The tigress stopped only a few feet away, towering over him. Her eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. She sniffed the air, close enough that he felt her breath against his skin. Ethan clenched his knife tighter, though deep down he knew it would do nothing against her. His throat was dry, but his voice finally broke the silence. I didn't hurt him, I only fed him. The tigress tilted her head slightly, her lips parted, showing sharp teeth. Her growl lowered, softer now, but no less dangerous. She glanced at the cub, then back at him. Her eyes burned with questions he could not understand. The cub nudged her leg again, making a soft sound. For a long, tense moment, she did nothing. Then, with a final deep growl, she stepped back into the shadows, her glowing eyes still locked on him. Ethan's chest heaved. He kept his knife raised, heart slamming against his ribs. The jungle swallowed them, mother and cub fading into the dark. But her presence lingered in the air, heavy and sharp, as if she had left part of herself behind. Ethan sat down slowly by the fire, his hands shaking. He knew one thing. Feeding that cub had just changed everything. And somewhere in the dark, a tigress mother was watching. The night after the encounter, Ethan could not sleep. The jungle seemed alive with whispers and unseen eyes. Every rustle in the brush made him tighten his grip on his knife. When the fire burned low, he swore he saw shapes moving just beyond the light. He told himself it was only his mind, but deep down he knew she was still out there. At dawn, he woke to a sound. The cub sat near his camp, its eyes glowing in the pale light. In its mouth, it carried a scrap of bloody meat. It dropped the piece at his feet and stared at him as if waiting. Ethan frowned, confused. He had given it food, and now it was returning the gesture. The meat looked raw, dangerous, but the intent was clear. The cub turned and bounded back into the trees without a sound. Ethan's unease grew through the day. He worked to repair his shelter, but he felt watched. Whenever he glanced at the tree line, there was nothing, yet the hairs on his arms rose as though a predator's eyes were locked on him. The silence was too heavy. Even the birds were gone. By evening, he found himself circling the camp, searching for signs. The answer came with a growl, low, vibrating, shaking his bones. He spun, knife raised, as the tigress mother stepped into view. She was even more terrifying under the rising moon, her stripes shimmering like liquid silver. She walked with measured grace, tail lashing, eyes fixed on him. The cub padded behind her, calmer than before. Ethan's throat tightened. She stopped a short distance away, her head lowering slightly. When she spoke, the sound shocked him. It was deep, rough, but clear, like a voice sharpened by growl. "Why?" The word rumbled out of her chest. Ethan swallowed, confused. "Why? What?" Her lips curled back just enough to show fangs. "Why feed him?" His hand trembled, but he forced himself to stand tall. He was hungry, that's all. Her eyes narrowed, burning with something sharper than anger. She began to circle him, slow and deliberate, as if testing his scent, his fear. He kept turning, never letting her out of sight. The cub sat quietly, watching the strange exchange. "You trespass here," she growled. "Humans steal, humans kill. You are weak, yet dangerous." "I'm not here to steal," Ethan said firmly. His voice shook, but he made himself hold her gaze. "I just helped." For a moment, the air was so still he could hear his own heartbeat. The tigress stopped right behind him, close enough that her breath brushed his neck. His muscles locked, but he did not run. Slowly, she leaned forward, inhaling deeply, as if memorizing his scent. Her growl shifted into a sound he could not name, low, uncertain, almost conflicted. "Strange human," she muttered. Her eyes flicked down to the cub, then back to him. For the first time, she did not look ready to strike. She looked curious, but her curiosity ended with a flash of fangs. She stepped back into the trees, her voice deep and final. "This changes nothing. My kind will not forgive." The cub hesitated, glancing between her and Ethan before vanishing after her. Within seconds, the jungle swallowed them both again. Ethan lowered the knife, his body shaking from the tension. He had survived another meeting, but the weight of her words pressed heavy in his mind. She had spared him, yet her warning rang like thunder. Somewhere deep inside, he understood one thing. This was not the last time their paths would cross. The jungle no longer felt like wilderness. It felt like a cage. Ethan woke every morning with the same feeling, that he was being studied. The cub appeared more often now, never empty-mouthed. Sometimes it dragged scraps of meat, sometimes fruit with strange glowing skin. Each time it dropped the gift near his camp and sat staring until he accepted. The small gestures unsettled him. Predators did not give food. Predators took. At night, the sense of eyes sharpened. The fire's light only reached so far, and just beyond it, golden eyes glowed faintly among the trees. He would hear branches bend, hear the low thump of heavy paws. Yet she never entered the light. The tigress mother lingered on the edge, as if measuring him. He told himself he should be terrified, but what grew inside him was stranger. An awareness, a pull, like being part of something unseen. Once, while checking traps along a stream, Ethan found one destroyed. The snare he had tied carefully was shredded as if with claws. Nearby, the cub crouched, chewing happily on the rabbit he had meant to catch. Ethan raised his knife in frustration, but then he froze. Behind the cub in the trees stood the tigress. She was still, silent, her gaze fixed on him. It was not a warning, not a threat. It was something more complex, something he could not name. Ethan left the trap as it was and backed away. The cub followed him with curious eyes before darting back to its mother. She did not move. She simply watched, and when he turned his back, he could still feel her presence crawling across his skin. That night, The fire burned low, and he heard soft steps. When he looked up, the cub was at his camp again, curled close to the fire as if it belonged there. Ethan almost pushed it away, but the creature pressed closer, warm against his side. His chest tightened with unease, yet he did not move it. In the darkness, far beyond the fire, golden eyes gleamed again. The tigress was there, motionless, silent, letting her child rest against a human. Ethan lay awake, knife in hand, heart racing. She could have torn him apart, she could have taken the cub away, but she did neither. Instead, she kept her distance, watching as if the cub's choice mattered more than her instinct. The boundary between hunter and hunted had shifted, and Ethan felt it. He was no longer just surviving in her jungle. He was part of something he could not yet understand. The first scream tore through the night like steel ripping apart. Ethan leapt from his shelter, knife drawn, eyes darting into the darkness. The cub wasn't near the fire this time. The sound came again, higher, desperate, and then the ground shook under the weight of something charging. A predator burst from the trees, its skin rough like stone, its mouth wide with jagged teeth that glistened under the firelight. Taller than him, heavier than anything he had faced before, it moved with terrifying speed. Ethan barely rolled aside as it snapped at him, its teeth clashing loud enough to echo. His knife looked pathetic against the beast's armored hide, but he slashed anyway, cutting shallow across its face. The creature roared and struck with a clawed arm, sending him sprawling into the dirt. He scrambled back to his feet, holding his knife out with shaking hands. The beast lunged again, knocking down his shelter, scattering embers into the night. Heat seared his skin as sparks flew past. Ethan swung wildly, adrenaline screaming through him. He managed to cut into the softer flesh under its jaw, but it was not enough. The beast howled, more enraged than wounded. Then the jungle itself seemed to split open. A roar answered the chaos, deeper, sharper, shaking the very ground. The striped tigress exploded from the shadows with claws unsheathed and fangs bared. She slammed into the stone-skinned predator with a force that cracked branches and sent dirt flying. They rolled, claws and teeth, tearing at each other in a frenzy of sound and fury. Ethan stumbled back, eyes wide. The tigress was faster, stronger, every movement precise. Her claws tore deep into the beast's face, her teeth clamped down on its throat. The predator thrashed once, twice, then fell silent under her weight. She stood over it, chest heaving, fur streaked with blood that was not her own. The cub appeared behind her, eyes wide but unafraid, as if this violence was nothing new. Ethan gripped his knife tighter, though he knew it was useless now. The tigress turned, slow and deliberate, her glowing eyes fixing on him. The air was heavy with the smell of blood. For a moment, Ethan thought she would tear him apart too, that killing one predator was no reason to spare another. But then she spoke, her voice rough, her chest rumbling. "Weak," she growled, her teeth still dripping red, but brave. Ethan stood frozen, knife trembling in his hand. Her words sank into him, heavier than any weapon. It wasn't praise, but it wasn't scorn either. It was recognition. The tigress lowered her head slightly, not in submission, but in something else, acknowledgement. Then, without another sound, she turned back into the trees, the cub following close at her side. Ethan's fire was nearly dead, his shelter destroyed, blood staining the ground where the predator lay. His body shook with exhaustion and terror, but his mind could not escape the words she left behind. Weak, but brave. For the first time since he had crashed on this world, he wondered if he had earned the eyes that never stopped watching him. The jungle tested him in ways no battlefield ever had. After the night of blood, the tigress did not appear again, but Ethan knew she was near. The cub returned each morning, curious and stubborn, often dragging him deeper into the trees. Once, it led him to a thicket of thorned vines. Ethan cursed as he tried to push through, skin tearing, but the cub darted ahead and yelped. He followed, only to realize the ground had given way beneath its paws. A sinkhole yawned open, sucking the cub into shifting mud. Without thinking, Ethan dove forward, catching its scruff before it sank completely. The creature thrashed, claws scraping his arms, but he pulled with all his strength. The mud clung like glue, dragging at his legs, threatening to swallow them both. With one final cry, he heaved the cub out onto solid ground and rolled after it, coughing and spitting dirt. The cub trembled, pressing against him, its glowing eyes wide. When Ethan looked up, the tigress stood above them, silent and fierce. She had been there, hidden, watching every second. His chest tightened as her eyes met his. For a long moment she did nothing. Then, with a flick of her tail, she turned and disappeared again, leaving only the weight of her stare behind. Days passed, and each one felt like a trial. Traps he set would vanish, broken neatly apart. Food he gathered would be scattered as if stolen. Sometimes he found fresh kills placed near his camp, gifts or warnings. He couldn't decide. He began to see it clearly. She was testing him, measuring whether he could endure in a world that chewed men to bone. The cub became his shadow, bounding through undergrowth, nipping at his boots. Ethan scolded it, but his words lacked real anger. The cub had chosen him, or perhaps the tigress had allowed it. Either way, he was no longer alone, and the more time he spent in their presence, the more he sensed a shift. The tigress was no longer just a predator. She was a judge, and her judgment was not yet decided. One night, as he sharpened his knife by the fire, she stepped into the open. No growl, no threat, just her immense form, silver stripes gleaming in the flames. The cub rushed to her, but she raised a paw, holding it back. Her eyes locked on Ethan. "You survive," she rumbled, "but survival is not strength." Ethan set the knife down slowly, meeting her gaze. His voice was tired, but steady. "Then tell me what is." Her lips curved. Not a smile, not yet, but something close to it. Her fangs flashed in the firelight as she spoke again. "Live through my trials, human. Then I will know what you are." Before he could answer, she turned and melted into the jungle, the cub following reluctantly behind her. Ethan sat alone in the flickering light, heart pounding. The game was no longer about staying alive. It was about proving himself to a tigress who could decide his fate with a single swipe of her claws, and for the first time, he wanted to prove it. The storm came without warning. The sky split open with thunder, and rain poured down in sheets so heavy it drowned the fire in seconds. Ethan's shelter collapsed under the weight of water and wind, throwing him into the mud. He scrambled to save what little he had, but the storm ripped it all away, his fire starter, his traps, even the last scraps of dried food. Lightning slashed across the jungle canopy, and in that flash he saw golden eyes watching. He tried to move, but pain shot up his leg. A fallen branch had slammed against his knee when the shelter fell, leaving him limping and gasping in the downpour. The mud sucked at his boots, every step dragging him lower. He collapsed, chest heaving, face pressed into the cold ground as rain hammered his back. His vision blurred, and for a moment he thought this was it, that the jungle had finally claimed him. Then the ground trembled. Heavy paws sank into the mud near his face. He forced his eyes open and saw her standing above him, the tigress mother, her silver-striped body glowing faintly in the storm's lightning. She lowered her head, her breath hot against his skin, and for the first time, Ethan did not reach for his knife. He had no strength left. He could only stare into her burning eyes and wait. Instead of claws, he felt her teeth close gently around the fabric of his jacket. With terrifying strength, she lifted him as if he weighed nothing and slung him across her broad shoulders. The rain soaked them both, but her body radiated heat, steady and powerful. She carried him through the storm, moving with the ease of a creature born to command the wild. They reached a cavern hidden behind a wall of vines. Inside, the air was warmer, shielded from the rain. She laid him down near a natural fire pit already glowing with embers. The cub appeared from the shadows, eyes wide with concern, pressing against his chest with soft sounds. Ethan let out a weak laugh, his hand brushing its fur. The tigress crouched beside him, her claws digging into the stone as if resisting instinct. Her gaze studied his wounds, her head tilting as though weighing something deeper than survival. With surprising gentleness, she tore a strip of hide from a kill stored in the cave and pressed it against his bleeding arm. Her rough tongue cleaned mud from his cheek. Ethan's breathing steadied, but his heart raced. Every movement of hers was controlled, dangerous, yet laced with something new, care. She spoke, her voice low, vibrating through the cavern walls. "You are fragile, yet you do not break." He managed a faint smile, his voice raw. "Not yet." Her eyes narrowed, glowing in the firelight. She leaned closer, so close her breath brushed his face. "Perhaps the human is not so weak. Perhaps he is worthy." The cub curled at his side, warm and trusting. Ethan lay still, staring into the tigress's unblinking eyes. She was no longer just predator, no longer just judge. In that hidden cavern, with storm winds howling outside, she had become something far more dangerous and far more intimate. The night was too quiet. Ethan sensed it even before the cub stirred and whimpered softly at his side. The jungle, always alive with whispers and clicks, had fallen into a heavy silence. He pushed himself up despite the ache in his knee and reached for the knife he kept close. The tigress was already standing, her silver-striped body tense, ears flat against her head. Her golden eyes burned toward the mouth of the cavern. Shadows shifted, and then they came. Tall figures stepped through the vines, their armor glinting with faint bioluminescent patterns. Spears tipped with jagged crystal gleamed under torchlight. Warriors of her kind. They moved like a hunting pack, silent, assured, surrounding the cavern in a half-circle. The cub pressed against Ethan's leg, trembling. One of the warriors raised his spear and spoke with a voice that cut the air. "You shelter a human. You break our law. Give him to us." Ethan's grip tightened on his knife, though it felt like a toy against their weapons. He forced himself to stand, heart hammering. Before he could speak, the tigress stepped between him and the warriors. Her growl filled the cave, low and deep, shaking dust from the stone walls. "He fed my child," she snarled. "He earned my protection." The leader sneered, his fangs glinting. "A human is nothing. His kind poisons, betrays, consumes. You shame yourself by standing with him." The tigress's muscles rippled, her tail lashing. She glanced back at Ethan for the briefest second. In her eyes, he saw the weight of choice, duty to her people or loyalty to what had grown between them. Then her decision struck like lightning. She lowered her head, spread her claws, and let her voice roar through the cavern. "He is mine." The words rolled with finality, not as prey, but as mate, claimed by law older than the warriors themselves. The cavern fell silent. The warriors froze, their eyes widening. None dared challenge such a claim. To do so would mean facing her in combat, and none looked ready to risk it. The leader's jaw clenched. His gaze flicked between Ethan and the tigress, fury in his eyes, but even he lowered his spear. "So be it," he spat, "but when he fails you, it will be your shame." With that, the warriors melted back into the jungle, their glowing armor vanishing into the dark. Ethan's breath left him in a rush. His knife slipped from his hand, clattering against the stone floor. The cub mewled and pressed tighter against him, but his eyes stayed locked on her. The tigress turned to him slowly, her chest heaving, her fangs still bared, but not at him. Her voice was quieter now, but sharper, almost intimate. "From this night, human, you are no longer a trespasser. You are bound to me, to my blood, to my law." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had fed a starving cub, and now he stood in the firelit cave of a tigress queen, claimed before her tribe. The jungle outside felt different, the air heavier, as if the world itself had shifted. He was no longer just surviving. He belonged to her, and nothing would ever be the same again.